Right now, you're probably not sitting in a casino, you're probably not rolling dice on a velvet table, or staring at a roulette wheel, or watching a horse race with a ticket in your hand. But you have gambled before. Maybe you bet with a friend over a football match. Maybe you bought a lottery ticket. Maybe you flipped a coin and said, "Heads, I win. Tails, you lose." And when you did that, it probably felt like nothing special, just a game, just a tiny little risk. But what you were doing was one of the oldest things a human being can do. Older than money, older than writing, older than kings, taxes, cities, and laws. Maybe even older than farming itself. Because gambling does not begin with casinos. It begins the first time a human looked at an uncertain outcome and decided to put something on it. Not always money, maybe a shell, maybe a tool, maybe a piece of meat, maybe pride, maybe status, maybe just the right to laugh at the loser. But the idea was the same. Let chance decide. And that idea goes back much further than most people think. For a long time, historians told the story like this. First, humans built civilizations. Then they invented money. Then they invented markets. And once people had wealth, they started gambling with it. So gambling was treated like a side effect of civilization, something that appeared after cities became rich enough, bored enough, and corrupt enough to start throwing dice in back rooms. But the archaeology tells a stranger story. Because the oldest evidence does not come from a palace. It does not come from a casino. It does not even come from a city. It comes from Ice Age hunter-gatherers. In 2026, archaeologist Robert Madden published a study that changed the timeline. He re-examined hundreds of small artifacts from prehistoric sites across Western North America. For decades, many of these objects had been sitting in collections under vague labels: gaming pieces, bone fragments, odd little wooden or stone objects. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like treasure, but when Madden looked closer, he noticed a pattern. Many of these pieces were not random scraps. They had been shaped, marked, designed, and they seemed to work as dice. Not modern cube dice with 6 sides. These were simpler, 2-sided dice, binary lots, objects that could be tossed onto the ground to produce one of 2 outcomes, like flipping a coin. One side means this, the other side means that. And some of the oldest examples came from late Pleistocene sites associated with the Folsom period, in places like Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. They date back more than 12,000 years. Think about that. More than 12,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age, people were already making objects whose only purpose was to create a random result. No coins, no paper money, no writing, no permanent cities, no kings sitting on thrones, just small groups of highly mobile hunter-gatherers moving through a cold and dangerous landscape and carrying dice. That is the part that makes this so important. Because if these objects really were used for games of chance, then gambling did not begin when humans became civilized. It began while humans were still living in a world of mammoths, bison, stone spear points, and long-distance survival. And that raises a deeper question. Why would Ice Age hunter-gatherers need dice? Why would people who had to track animals, find food, make tools, and survive brutal environments spend time tossing little pieces of bone or wood onto the ground? The easy answer is, because games are fun. And they are. But that answer is too small. Because games of chance do something very powerful. They create fairness between people who do not fully trust each other. Imagine 2 groups meeting on the open plains. They do not live together. They do not share a chief. They may not even know each other well, but they need to trade stone, hides, food, information, maybe even marriage partners. That kind of meeting is useful, but it is also tense. Everyone is watching everyone else. No one wants to be cheated. No one wants to look weak. And then, someone brings out the dice. Suddenly, there is a neutral force in the middle. Not your decision. Not my decision. Chance. The throw decides. That may sound simple, but socially, it is huge. A game gives strangers a reason to sit together. It gives them rules before they have laws. It gives them competition without violence. It gives them a way to exchange things without turning every disagreement into a fight. In that sense, gambling may have been more than entertainment. It may have been a social technology, a way to make uncertainty useful, a way to turn risk into relationship. And once humans discovered that, they never stopped. Thousands of years later, on the other side of the world, people were using one of the most natural dice ever made, knuckle bones. These were the ankle bones of sheep, goats, or other hoofed animals. Small, hard, easy to hold, and strangely perfect for chance. Because a knuckle bone does not land the same way every time. It has different sides, different shapes, different probabilities. Long before people carved cube-shaped dice, nature had already made a randomizer. All humans had to do was notice it, and they did. Across the ancient world, knuckle bones were thrown, counted, interpreted, and played with. Sometimes by children, sometimes by adults, sometimes for games, sometimes for divination, and sometimes, almost certainly, for bets. This is where gambling begins to blur with something much older and deeper. Because in the ancient world, chance was rarely just chance. A random throw could be luck, but it could also be fate, or the will of the gods, or a message from the dead. That is one reason gambling becomes so hard to separate from religion. To us, a dice roll is math. To many ancient people, a dice roll was the universe speaking in a language humans could not control. And that made it powerful. By around 2600 BC, gambling and games of chance had entered the world of cities. In ancient Mesopotamia, in the royal cemetery of Ur, archaeologists found one of the most famous board games ever discovered, the Royal Game of Ur. It was not just a board, it came with pieces and dice, beautiful little objects, buried with the dead. The game was a race. Players moved pieces across a patterned board, trying to beat the opponent to the end. Part strategy, part luck. Exactly the kind of thing humans still love. Because that combination is addictive. If a game is pure skill, the better player usually wins. If it is pure chance, no one has control. But when skill and luck mix together, something strange happens. The loser thinks, I almost had it. The winner thinks, I knew what I was doing. And both of them want to play again. That is gambling psychology in its oldest form. Hope survives, because chance never closes the door completely. Around the same broad ancient world, Egypt had its own famous game, Senet. At first glance, Senet looks like a board game. Rows of squares, small pieces, players moving across the board. But the movement was decided by casting sticks or bones. Again, chance enters the game, but in Egypt, Senet became more than a pastime. Over time, it was connected to the journey of the soul through the afterlife. The board became symbolic. The game became spiritual. The throw was not just about winning against another person. It was about moving through danger, passing through uncertainty, surviving fate. That tells us something important. Ancient people did not only gamble because they wanted prizes. They gambled because life itself felt like a gamble. A harvest could fail. A child could die. A river could flood too much, or not enough. A hunter could return with food, or not return at all. Before science could explain probability, humans were already living inside it. Every day was uncertain. Every decision had risk. So they built small versions of that uncertainty. A board, a bone, a throw, a game, something they could hold in their hands, something they could play with, something that made the invisible force of chance visible. And maybe that is why gambling appears so early in so many places. It is not just greed. It is not just corruption. It is not just the desire to win. It is the human need to negotiate with uncertainty, to touch it, to test it, to ask it a question. Am I lucky today? Is fate on my side? Can I beat the odds? By the time written civilizations appear, gambling is already everywhere. Mesopotamians had dice, Egyptians had board games of chance, Greeks and Romans threw knucklebones. People bet on races, fights, games, animals, and anything else that could produce a winner and a loser. And almost immediately, governments tried to control it. That is another sign of how old and powerful gambling is. The moment states appear, gambling becomes something rulers worry about. Because gambling moves wealth, it creates debt, it causes fights, it tempts people to cheat. But it also brings people together, so authorities never really eliminate it. They ban it, tax it, regulate it, condemn it, then quietly allow it again. Because gambling is not some minor habit that civilization invented, it is something civilization inherited. The real story is not that humans invented gambling after they invented money. The real story is that humans were playing with chance long before money existed. Before coins, they gambled with objects. Before objects, Maybe they gambled with food, labor, promises, and pride. Before casinos, there were bones on the ground. Before roulette wheels, there were two-sided dice in Ice Age camps. Before lottery tickets, there was someone holding a small carved piece and saying, if it lands this way, I win. If it lands that way, you do. So, when did humans first start gambling? The safest answer is at least 12,000 years ago. But the honest answer is probably earlier, because archaeology only gives us the things that survive. Bone survives, stone survives, sometimes wood survives, but jokes do not survive. Bets do not survive. The laughter around a fire does not survive. The first person who said, I bet you can't hit that target, left no artifact behind. The first hunter who wagered a piece of meat on a throw left no written record. The first child who tossed a bone and made a rule for it disappeared completely. So the beginning of gambling is probably older than the evidence, maybe much older, and that is what makes it so human. Every time you roll dice, place a bet, flip a coin, or risk something on an uncertain outcome, you are not doing something modern. You are reaching back into one of the oldest habits of our species. The tools changed, the stakes changed, the rooms got brighter, the tables got cleaner, the dice became plastic, the cards became printed, the casinos became digital. But the impulse is ancient. A human hand, a small object, a silent hope, one throw between fear and reward. And for a moment, just like someone 12,000 years ago, you wait for chance to answer,